All right, so the riot,
Hmm.
right off the town square, and what do you think started it, or what
I
was it
don't
about?
really know,
Was it the
but
blacks rioting or the whites rioting or?
all I know, we were going up a hill through what was known as the projects,
Uh-huh.
and all of a sudden people were fighting and hitting each other with baseball bats and whatever they could pick up. And my sister and I ended up taking one of the white kids to the hospital. He
Yeah.
got bashed in the head and
So
he
what
was
did you do
bleeding all
when you
over the
saw
place. I was
all
like,
this?
holy Hannah,
Did
you
you try
know?
to get away from it?
Well, you really couldn't. It was a narrow street
Uh-huh.
and there were like row houses on both sides of the street.
Uh-huh.
There was no place to go. There weren't even alleys in between these homes.
Were the police there, or?
Eventually, eventually.
So you
But
were there
we
right at the
grabbed
beginning
this
of it.
kid that got bashed in the head
Mm-hmm.
and threw him in the car and, ran back to school, threw him in the car and took him to the hospital. So we just tried to get out of there as quickly as possible.
Was anyone killed?
No, but I think there were some that were pretty seriously injured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did the newspapers or anybody comment on it the day after? Or?
Tactfully.
Uh-huh.
They
So they
tried to
didn't
kind
want to
of
admit it so
downplay
much,
it.
huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But kids would come to school with all kinds of weapons, and
Mm-hmm.
in the old part of the school building, if you I gotta explain this properly. If you were going up the stairway, which was wide enough for two people, one going up, one coming down. If you're going up the stairs and you weren't moving fast enough and there was a black person behind you, especially the girls,
Mm-hmm.
they would have hat pins and they'd get you in your bun,
Yeah.
hurry up, you so and so, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So just a lot,
It
lot of
was freaky.
tension.
I
Yeah.
got cornered in the locker room at school by 6 black girls because one of my friends was black.
Uh-huh.
And, they weren't so sure about me. And so they asked me questions and kind of felt me out to see what kind of person I was. Was I
Yeah.
okay to be that person's friend?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Do you remember the questions they asked you?
No, I
No.
don't, honestly. I tried to blot all that out. I
Yeah.
was petrified.
Yeah.
Because there was nobody in the locker room.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so.
It was like, whoa.
See, we lived in Germany for a little while when I was young because my dad was in the Army, and we
Mhm.
lived in Washington. And so we were in communities with almost every ethnicity.
Oh, yeah.
I remember in one house we lived in Germany, apartment house, there was us, we were
Mm-hmm.
with a white family. We had a Hispanic family there. There was a
Mhm.
black family there. There was a Turkish family there.
Right.
And it was just a real hodgepodge of people.
And that's great.
Yeah.
I wish all kids could grow up that way.
Yeah, and then when we went to Tacoma, Washington, it was that way. The military housing there, oh my goodness, there was gobs and gobs of us. So
Mhm.
we're all little kids running around. We're all different races, different colors,
Mhm.
and we all loved each other.
Mhm.
So at that young age, we were just
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of put into it, and I credit that partially for why I am the way I am.
Mhm.
I can't say that I'm totally without any biases, but I try to be.
Right.
And, I don't really hold hard feelings towards people, of their sexual preference or race or color or
Exactly.
religion or any of that stuff. My younger brothers and sisters, some of them, they didn't get that same upbringing. We moved to DeSoto, Missouri, and in DeSoto, I don't think it's as bad now, but when I was there, there was one place, it's a hilly place, and there was one hill they call Blow Hill, and that's where the majority, almost all of the black people in town lived.
Okay.
And depending on who you were, I guess, and your attitude, and because I had a lot of friends of many different races, and I think people just kind of recognized me for not harboring things, so I got along fine with everybody.
Oh, yeah.
But I know that not always did the blacks and whites in my town, even when I was there, get along.
Mm-hmm.
Just depending on who the person was,
That's right.
they were a jerk or racist or prejudiced or what.
And the circumstances, yeah.
Yeah, plus we were all on the poor side of town. You know,
Mhm.
Blow Hill is on the poor side of DeSoto.
Right.
It's balanced out a little more now, but
Mhm.
in the 70s and 80s it wasn't. You know, that was the poor side of town.
Yeah.
Was where we all were.
Sure.
So you have the riot on your
Mhm.
parade day. Did they have the parade again the next year?
Yes,
They did?
yeah.
Without trouble? They probably had police
Yeah.
there for that one, didn't they?
It was well covered, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what else do you remember about those times? Anything else stick out?
I don't know. I know that in the, what's the name of that store? That had the counter that you could go and have lunch. Isn't that awful? I'm having a senior moment. You know the kind of place I'm talking about,
Yeah,
though.
it was a diner.
Yeah,
and
it was actually a store like Kresge's. And it was a store kind of like Walmart kind of idea, smaller of course, but they had a counter and you could get lunch and whatever like they show in the pictures.
Uh-huh.
And even my mother was not a prejudiced person. We'd go in and we'd shop a little bit and sit down and to have lunch or whatever. And she would make sure that I wasn't sitting next to a black person.
Yeah.
And, you know, of course I was little and I didn't really think much about it, but, you know, it was weird.
It's odd, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So in there, and did they have separate restrooms or anything separate in there, or?
I think I remember seeing in a gas station once the fountains
Yeah.
and the restrooms.
Yeah.
Of course, Jersey is a northern more state,
Uh-huh.
so it wasn't as prevalent
Yeah.
as it was down south.
Yeah.
You know.
But
But the two races didn't socialize. They didn't mix
Well, I
like they
remember
do now. I mean,
my family would always give these disclaimers because they're all apostolic Pentecost,
Mhm.
very religious,
mhm.
but not always Christ-like, just
Right.
religious. And there would be things like, well, I don't hate them,
Mhm.
but they belong in our area, we belong in ours, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
I love them all the same, but I don't think that we should mix. White people, black people shouldn't marry each other, and
Right.
things like that.
Right.
But now the grandkids, I consider myself one of the grandkids. Maybe I shouldn't because now there's 2 more generations under me,
Mhm.
and nobody really cares.
No.
There's probably one family in mind that a little more backwards who probably still has those same feelings, but the majority, when you look at the kids and you talk about things like that now, they look at you like you're foreign because they don't understand why anybody would dislike somebody else just based on,
Color or
Yeah.
something.
yeah,
Right.
which is a great thing.
When I was beginning dating,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't allowed to date somebody that was not my same religion.
Yeah,
We were Protestants.
yeah,
I was raised Presbyterian.
uh-huh,
You don't go out with a Catholic.
yeah.
It's like, come on.
That's how it was for me too. With my family's religion, my ex-wife, she was Catholic, and that was
Mhm.
one of the big things. Oh, but isn't her grandma Catholic? I'm like, yeah.
And how are you
or-
going to raise the children?
Yes. Yeah, what
Oh
church are you going to go to after you get married?
my gosh.
And so we're basically the same as Assembly of God. They're
Right.
Pentecostal too,
Okay.
but they believe in the Trinity, that God and Jesus and the Holy Ghost are 3 separate entities, where the apostolic believe that there might have 3 different names, but they're basically one deity, one entity. And so we weren't even allowed to go and visit the Assembly of God church that believed everything else as far as speaking in tongues and all the spiritual stuff and the really hopping music and full immersion baptism. but because of that one little difference, we couldn't associate with them.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. Oh my gosh.
it's just
Yeah.
funny, but that's just how it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were interesting times. It was really a whole different world.
And when people talk about the good old days,
Uh-huh.
I always wonder, what good old days are you really talking about? You know, because we've come so far as disease and illnesses,
Mhm.
getting along with people, understanding people. Society is not as violent as it was when I was a kid, and I know
No.
it isn't as violent as it was when you were a kid.
No.
And
You felt much safer.
yeah, other than nostalgia, I don't understand the good old days. I think we're still improving now. I wouldn't want to go back.
But there are other things that are not as good now as they were then.
Like what?
Like AIDS and, all of that.
Yeah.
Back then, you didn't have to worry about any of that.
Yeah.
That didn't come about until what, the 80s?
The 80s and the late 70s and I remember that when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Because somebody in St. Louis had it. The parents wanted them to have their own water fountain, didn't want them going to school with
Mm-hmm.
their kids and so forth. And but that I always considered that kind of an uneducation thing, because for people of that time,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they had AIDS, they were treated so poorly and
Oh.
awfully. But now, the education is better. People
Mm-hmm.